Welcome back, everyone, to Discussing Singlehood. We're on episode 5 already. Today we're looking at something that's pretty timely, actually, as Valentine's Day is coming up.
hmm
It's all about how singlehood is being shown in the media in India.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because Valentine's Day, we all think of it as kind of a celebration of romantic love, right?
Yeah, so sure.
But the media in India, especially if you look at magazines and newspapers, you're seeing more and more that they're acknowledging single people during this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it kind of reflects this bigger change that we're seeing in Indian society as a whole. There are more single people now because people are waiting longer to get married, the divorce rate's gone up, and there's just more acceptance now of just being single.
So it's not just all about couples and hearts and flowers anymore.
No, not really.
Interesting. So they're starting to recognize that single people,
Yeah.
exist,
Yeah.
especially on Valentine's Day.
Especially on Valentine's Day. Right.
Okay, but how are they actually doing that? I mean, what are they saying? What are they showing?
Right. So it's not just about acknowledging that single people are out there, it's about how they're represented. And the media uses these specific techniques, you could almost call them linguistic strategies, to portray singlehood on Valentine's Day. And it's everything from like the type of speech they use to the words they choose, even down to like what they assume about their audience.
Linguistic strategies. Sounds kind of academic.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example? Like, say, in a magazine, a Valentine's Day magazine article. How does this actually work?
Sure. So think about it. When you pick up a magazine, they want to get your attention, right? They want to tell you what the article's about. So they use these very specific phrases. So you might see a title like Single Girl's Guide to Conquering Valentine's Day Blues or something about all the extra mushiness, surrounding the holiday. And that immediately tells the reader that this article is going to be about singles and how they're experiencing Valentine's Day.
Ooh. So those phrases are doing a lot of work then. They're not just describing the content, they're setting up like expectations for the reader, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Almost like, hey, single people, this is for you. We
Yeah.
see you, even on Valentine's Day.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
they're speaking directly to them. And it goes beyond just acknowledging that single people are there. These language choices often play into the emotions that are associated with being single on Valentine's Day.
Emotions, huh? Now, this is where I think it gets really interesting, maybe a little bit tricky, because when we think about Valentine's Day, we immediately think about love, happiness, excitement. But those are usually tied to being in a couple.
Right.
So what kinds of emotions are they using to portray singlehood on Valentine's Day?
That's a good question. And that's where we start to see some interesting contrasts. So you often find articles that talk about all the positive emotions that come with couples celebrating Valentine's Day, like the dinners, the gifts, the joy of being together.
Hmm.
But then they might talk about the loneliness or the misery, maybe even irritation or frustration that single people are supposedly experiencing. It's almost like they're presenting two totally different emotional landscapes.
Wow. That's a pretty stark contrast.
Yeah.
You're right. It's almost like couples are happy, singles are not.
Right.
I mean, is that kind of framing just reinforcing the idea that being single on Valentine's Day is automatically a negative experience?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? It's definitely a question to think about. On the one hand, the media is acknowledging singles, but on the other, are they unintentionally making them feel othered or even like there's something wrong with being single on Valentine's Day?
Hmm.
It's complicated, and I think we really have to look at how these portrayals might actually affect how people see themselves and how they experience being single, especially on a day like Valentine's Day.
And I imagine not all media is doing this.
Oh, no, definitely not.
There are probably different perspectives, different approaches depending on, what kind of media it is, who they're targeting,
Exactly. Yeah.
maybe even their own stance on all of this.
Absolutely. You've got a point there. There's definitely a range of portrayals out there, and it's important to look at those nuances. Some media might be holding on to those more traditional ideas about Valentine's Day, while others might be actively challenging those norms and even, presenting alternative ways to celebrate, no matter what your relationship status is.
Yeah. This is so fascinating.
Yes.
It really makes you think about how powerful media can be.
Yeah.
And how it shapes how we see something as personal as Valentine's Day. We'll be right back to dig deeper into all of this, so don't go anywhere. And we're back to discussing singlehood. We're talking about how being single is portrayed in Indian media, especially around Valentine's Day. And it's been quite interesting so far. Before the break, you mentioned that some media outlets are presenting these alternative ways to celebrate Valentine's Day, even if you're not in a romantic relationship.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how these different ways to celebrate actually tie into a bigger cultural shift that's happening in India. It's not just about, romantic love anymore. It's about looking at love in a broader sense, like
Mhm.
self-love or friendships or even being kind to other people.
I'm really curious about these alternative celebrations.
Hmm.
What are they suggesting? Is it just like go hang out with your friends, or is there more to it?
Oh, it's definitely deeper than just hanging out with friends. You're seeing a lot of articles and stuff that are encouraging single people to do things that help them discover themselves, and grow as individuals. Like you might see an article about going on a solo trip
Oh, wow.
where you can explore new places and try new things and really connect with yourself on a deeper level.
That's such a different way of thinking about Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on what you might not have, like a partner, you're celebrating being independent
Hmm.
and using the day to actually grow as a person.
Exactly. And it's not just solo trips either.
Right.
There's a big emphasis on self-care, especially around Valentine's Day. Articles and ads might suggest treating yourself to a spa day or buying yourself a gift or just taking some time to relax and recharge.
So it's almost like they're reclaiming Valentine's Day as a day for self-love and appreciating yourself, whether you're in a relationship or not.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
It's all about shifting the focus from finding validation from someone else to actually recognizing your own worth. And this whole idea of self-love often goes hand in hand with this bigger message about being kind and generous to others.
That's interesting. So it's not just about yourself, but also spreading that love and compassion to other people.
Right. Lots of articles encourage singles to celebrate Valentine's Day by doing something nice for someone else. Maybe volunteer at a local charity, or reach out to a friend who might be feeling lonely, or even just do some random acts of kindness.
I love how these suggestions challenge this idea that Valentine's Day is all about romantic love. It's almost like they're saying, hey, love can be expressed in so many ways. You don't need a romantic partner to experience it.
Yeah, it's a powerful message for sure, and it really fits in with this bigger trend of how we're redefining love and relationships in India today. But, we have to acknowledge that not all media portrays singlehood in this progressive or nuanced way, right? Like you were saying earlier, there's still that tendency to compare the happiness of couples with the potential loneliness of single people.
Right, right.
So how do these conflicting messages play out? Can you give us some concrete examples of how different media outlets are approaching this?
Yeah, for sure. I think that'd be really helpful.
Okay, so let's imagine two different scenarios. You've got a magazine that's targeting young urban professionals. They might be more likely to feature articles about things like solo travels, self-care, career success, really celebrating the independence and achievements of single women. But then you have a newspaper that's geared towards a more traditional audience, more family-oriented. They might focus on articles about finding a partner, getting married, the whole importance of marriage thing.
It's almost like they're speaking to totally different audiences with
Hmm.
different values and expectations.
Exactly.
And those expectations can really shape how singlehood is portrayed,
Yeah.
especially on a day like Valentine's Day. It seems like we need to be aware of those biases as consumers of media and really think critically about the messages we're taking in.
Absolutely. It's so important to be a discerning media consumer, especially when we're talking about something as personal and sensitive as singlehood. We need to be aware of those underlying messages, the language, the assumptions being made.
Yeah. It's like we talked about before, even small phrases like single girl or extra mushiness can actually have a big impact. They can reinforce stereotypes or create pressure and even affect how we feel about ourselves.
Right. It's all about reading between the lines, questioning the narratives, and forming our own informed opinions.
This has been such an insightful discussion. It's amazing how looking closely at something like Valentine's Day can tell us so much about societal norms, how media influences us, and how we see ourselves and others. But we're not finished yet. We'll be back in just a moment to wrap up our exploration of singlehood and Valentine's Day in the Indian media. So stick with us, there's more to come. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into how singlehood is portrayed in Indian media, especially around Valentine's Day. It's really been an interesting conversation, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting to see this kind of push and pull between the traditional expectations around, Valentine's Day and relationships and these newer ways of thinking about love and being single. It feels good the media is trying to cater to both sides.
It's like they're trying to figure out how to talk to this growing group of people who don't fit into that traditional, couples-only box.
Oh, right. Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating because there's this huge opportunity for the media to really shape the story around singlehood and not just focus on what might be seen as lacking, but actually highlight all the good things about being single, especially on a day like Valentine's Day, which is so focused on romantic love.
So as we wrap up our discussion today, what are some of the key things our listeners should keep in mind when they see these media portrayals? As Valentine's Day is coming up, what should they be looking out for?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that media is a business, right? They have audiences they're trying to reach, advertisers they want to please, their own agendas.
Hmm.
So just being aware of those things can help you understand the messages they're sending. Don't just accept everything you see. Ask yourself, why is this being presented this way? Who is this supposed to benefit?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like putting on your critical thinking cap and not taking everything at face value.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to have those conversations with your friends and family, even on social media. The more we talk about these portrayals and how they make us feel, the more we can push for better representations of singlehood, more inclusive, more authentic.
We have the power to demand change, not just by being, critical consumers of media, but also by speaking up about what we want to see.
And I think the most important takeaway, especially on Valentine's Day, is to remember that your worth doesn't depend on your relationship status. Whether you're single, in a relationship, whatever it might be, you deserve to celebrate love in all its forms. And that includes celebrating yourself.
That's such a good reminder. At the end of the day, Valentine's Day is about love.
Mm-hmm.
And that love can be romantic, platonic, the love you have for your family, and most importantly, the love you have for yourself.
Exactly. Celebrate your connections, celebrate your independence, celebrate who you are.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the world of singlehood and Valentine's Day in the Indian media. We hope this conversation has given you some new things to think about and maybe inspired you to look at these media portrayals with a more critical eye.
Yeah. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reactions with us on social media using the hashtag Discussing Singlehood.
And until next time, remember to celebrate love in all its forms. Happy Valentine's Day.